Hey, Future Frost here, back with another data pack for the Origins mod. Today I'm going to be going over my latest origin, the Sculkspawn. As always, the link to the data pack will be down in the description. While you're down there, I would appreciate if you stopped for a moment to like the video and subscribe to my channel. It helps out a lot and it's a huge motivator to keep making content and data packs. Along with that, down in the description, there will be a link to my Discord server, the great place for reporting bugs, any questions, concerns you have of the data packs. I do also make origins from time to time based on people's suggestions, so if you join my Discord server, you can suggest origins there as well. There's also a link in the description to my Twitch channel, where I'll probably be going live and playing some of the data pack. Anyways, onto the origin. So, what is a Sculkspawn? Sculkspawn are a coincidental creation of the Sculk, formed when a fragment of blight shaped itself into consciousness by pure chance. A brain governed by sound instead of electricity, their thoughts are slow and erratic. Born from chaos, they are a strange anomaly, proof that even in disorder, something can take form, though imperfectly. The Sculkspawn has an impact of 3, meaning it significantly changes the base gameplay of the game. Some quick examples of this could be where you spawn in the world, as well as the origin completely changing how health works in the game. First ability we're looking at here is Abyssal Shifter. As a creature of pure Sculk, you are not confined to a single shape. Focus to shift between 3 grotesque forms, each a manifestation of the Sculk's twisted influence. This ability is probably the most important ability in the origin, as this is what allows you to switch between the 3 separate forms that are in it. And we'll be getting into what those forms are after I go over the base modifiers. The base modifiers apply to all the forms, while the forms have unique modifiers that only apply to them. The way this ability works though is that when you hit your secondary key, you'll move forward a form, and if you sneak and use the secondary key, you will move backwards a form. The first positive modifier we're going to be looking at is Abyssal Sight. The darkness of the Sculk is your realm, and your vision sharpens within it. In caves and Night's Embrace, you see clearer than those who dwell in the light. This modifier is fairly simple. It just means that you get night vision constantly. The next modifier we have is Flame Immunity. The searing flames of the churning depths of molten earth cannot harm your being. You are untouchable by fire or lava's rage, or creatures of the Sculk are immune. This is another pretty simple modifier. It just means that lava, fire, even something like magma blocks will do no damage to you. The next modifier we have is Hungerless. The need for sustenance is foreign to you. You thrive without consuming. Being of Sculk needs no food. This is yet another simple modifier here. All this means is that you will not need to eat food at all. Your hunger bar will stay full constantly. The next modifier we have is Scourge of the Flesh. The creatures you dispatch may leak a taint, a sliver of Sculk, that seeps into the world, spreading the corruption of the deep. What this modifier means is that when you kill an enemy, there is a small chance that they will drop, or rather, the player will be given Sculk items, such as obviously Sculk blocks, Shriekers, Sculk sensors, stuff like that. The last positive modifier we have is Wardens Adoptee. The Wardens, ancient and watchful, do not see you as a threat. Instead, they regard you with affection, finding you strangely endearing. What this modifier means is that Wardens will be completely passive to the player when they are using this origin. Even if the player attacks the Warden, damages it, it will not attack the player for any reason. The first neutral modifier we have is Abyssal Sink. Water is not your element. You do not drown, yet you sink within it, weighed down by the unseen hand of the Sculk's unnatural nature. What this modifier means is that the player will not be able to swim in water at all. They will slowly sink down to the bottom rather than plummet down at the normal fall speed. And obviously, as it says, your air bar won't go down at all. The next neutral modifier we have is Cradle of Ruin. You are born in the desolate remnants of an ancient city, where the echoes of the past and the whispered tendrils of Sculk-infused power linger. This modifier is just a fancy way of saying that you spawn in an ancient city. The next modifier we have is Echoes Unanswered. The Sculk sensors, ancient sentinels of sound and movement, remain undisturbed by your steps. What this modifier means is that walking, falling onto a block, even swimming sounds won't trigger Sculk sensors. Breaking blocks and hitting mobs may still trigger those though. The last neutral modifier we have is Whispering Sliver. Your form is smaller than that of a typical being, a mere sliver of the vast skulk, barely noticeable in comparison. Well, this modifier means that the player is just over a block tall, so if the player sneaks and walks up to a 1-block hole, they will be able to fit, but only if they're sneaking. The first negative modifier we have is Echo Feedback. The relentless use of your sonic powers risks backlash. Consecutive bursts may harm you, the chaotic energy feeding back into your fragile mind. What this modifier means is that when you use your primary abilities too fast, a bar will build up, and when that bar reaches about half, you'll start taking 1 damage. Beyond that, it takes 2, and beyond that, you'll start taking 4 damage every second. We'll get into what the primary abilities are later when I go over the forms. The next negative modifier we have is Sculk-Bound. Cursed by the depths of the Warden's realm, you suffer heightened torment from the bite of hoes and implements laced with the sinister power of Silk Touch. So what this modifier means is that, obviously, hoes and weapons enchanted with Silk Touch will do 150% damage to the player. I will note this isn't stacking, so a Silk Touch hoe won't deal multiple of that. The next modifier we have is Sculk Spasm. Pain may cause your form to waver, triggering unpredictable displacement as the Sculk struggles to maintain cohesion under attack. This modifier means is that when you take damage from any source, there is a chance for you to teleport to a random nearby location, basically just disorienting you as the player. The next modifier we have is Skulk's Nature. The Sculk cannot naturally grow on its own. It is reliant on the souls of dying creatures. As a result of this natural behavior, you do not naturally regenerate health. This modifier, pretty straightforward, just means your health will not regenerate at all through the normal means that you would in the base game. There is still ways you can get your health back, that's just in the unique forms, which we'll be getting to here in a second. The next modifier we have is Strange Heights. The concept of flight feels alien to you. The thought of soaring with the wings of an elytra makes you uncomfortably far from the earth, far from the embrace of the Sculk. This modifier means that you cannot fly with an elytra at all. You will still be able to equip it, but it won't do anything for you. The last negative modifier we have is Thought Disruption. The cacophony of thunder and violent explosions disorients your mind, rendering you vulnerable in their wake, as your Sculk mind's delicate balance is shattered by sound. What this modifier means is that when lightning strikes within like 64 blocks of you, you'll get nausea, slowness, mining fatigue, and weakness. Same effects will also be applied if you take damage to any kind of explosion. That could be TNT, a creeper, even a end crystal. Alright, that's all of the base modifiers done. Now we'll be moving on to the unique modifiers that apply to the separate forms. The form we'll be starting with is Hominid. This form is probably the one that you're going to be playing as the most, as it's the closest to the experience of the base game. As the name implies, this one is the closest to being human. The first ability we're going to be looking at in Hominid is Rupture Cry. By sacrificing fragments of your experience, you release a muted sonic shockwave, a diminished echo of the Warden's devastating roar. What this modifier means is that, similar to the Warden, in the direction you're looking, you'll shoot a sonic boom, obviously not dealing quite as much damage as the Warden though. Along with that, when you cast it, it will take some of your experience, though there is no cooldown, so you can shoot these out as fast as you want, though you will need to keep in mind that echo feedback will be in place. The next ability we'll be looking at is Tide of Sound. Focus your power into a circular wave of sonic energy, emanating from your core. This distorted pulse spreads outward, shaking the silence of the deep and tearing into your foes. This ability also uses your primary key, though you will need to sneak while you do it. What this does is very similar to Rupture Cry, except it's all around you instead of in a single direction. It is important to note that as this is a more powerful sonic wave, it will fill up your echo feedback faster. The first positive modifier of the Hominid is Burrowed Instincts. In biomes dominated by Sculk, your claws and tools carve through stone and earth with unnatural ease, attuned to the terrain's embrace. What this modifier means is that if you are below y equals 0, you will be able to break blocks at 1.5 times the speed. The next positive modifier we have is Feast of the Fallen. The death of your prey nourishes you. Slay a creature to siphon vitality, regaining fragments of your strength. What this modifier means is that when you kill an enemy, you will regain 1 heart. The next modifier we have is Nest of the Abyss. When rooted in Sculk-infused terrain, your connection strengthens. You move with unnatural swiftness, and gain 4 additional hearts as the Sculk embraces you. This modifier kind of explains it in its description pretty well. When you are standing on Sculk, you will be given increased movement speed along with, well, 4 additional hearts, as it says. This effect lasts for about 3 seconds after stepping off of Sculk blocks. There's a little bit of leeway on it. The next modifier we have is Pulse of Predation. With each creature you dispatch, your form surges with borrowed strength, temporarily bolstering your health as the Sculk revels in its spread. So what this modifier means is that, similar to Feast of the Fallen, when killing an enemy, you get boosted health rather than simply healing. So just to recap, when you kill an enemy, you will not only heal a heart, you will also gain +2 maximum hearts. The last positive modifier on the Hominid is Shrieker's Favor. Touching a Sculk Shrieker imbues you with its wrath, granting a surge of strength for 30 seconds, a fleeting blessing from the deep. This is another modifier that explains itself pretty well in the description. This one means that when you walk over a Sculk Shrieker, you will gain strength for 30 seconds. Pretty self-explanatory. The one and only negative modifier on the Hominid is Fragile Wretch. Your small, fragile form leaves you vulnerable, with only 8 base hearts to withstand the trials of the Abyss while in this form. A wretched thing, barely clinging to life amidst the overwhelming darkness. This modifier, as it says in it, you only have 8 base hearts. That's pretty much all that's to it. The rest is just kind of flavor text. Alright, so that's Hominid done. We'll be moving on to Amorphous next. The Amorphous form is mostly meant for healing and spreading Sculk. This is probably the form that you'll play as the least. Emit a resonating wave of sound that ripples through the air, revealing the shapes of nearby entities. For a fleeting moment, they are marked by a faint ghostly glow. This ability is fairly simple. All it means is that enemies within your radius will get the glowing effect. You can see where they are. This is mostly just useful to tell you where enemies are so you can avoid them while healing. The next ability we have is Veins of the Deep. Channel your inner reserves of experience to infest the ground beneath you with creeping tendrils of Sculk, twisting the very fabric of the land into an extension of the Sculk. So this ability is your sneak plus primary, probably one of the most useful abilities in the Origin. Using the key will toggle on and off the spreading of Sculk, very similar, well, exactly the same as a Sculk Catalyst would. It is important to note that this will burn through your experience pretty quick, so if you're saving your experience for something, probably don't use this one. I suppose after breaking the blocks, you do technically get back slightly more experience than you put in, but you also have to keep in mind that the time that it takes to spread the Sculk and then break it, and then the damage it will do to the terrain. The first positive modifier we have for the Amorphous form is Murmuring Shade. While you linger motionless amid the Skulk's creeping sprawl, your presence fades from the notice of hostile creatures. As long as their ire has not been provoked, you remain a shadow among the blight. So what this modifier means is that if you are surrounded by Sculk and not moving at all, mobs will not try to attack you at all, unless you have already hit them in some way, even if it's with an ability. The next modifier we have is Sculkmeld. Meld seamlessly into the Sculk, swimming through its dark, shifting mass as though it were water. However, your transformations are stilled within this realm. The Skulk's embrace binds you to a single form until you resurface. What this one means is that by running on top of Sculk blocks, instead of running, you will begin to swim in the blocks, phasing into them. That bit at the end it was talking about is that while you're inside of a Sculk block, you won't be able to change to another form using Abyssal Shifter. This is mostly just there to make it so the player doesn't suffocate inside of a block. The last positive modifier on the Amorphous form is Squishing Sculk. Your body, soft and yielding like the Sculk itself, absorbs the shock of even the greatest falls. Gravity's bite holds no sway over you. All this modifier means is that fall damage will do no damage to you. Now included in that is technically the damage from Ender Pearls as well. The first negative modifier of the Amorphous form is Abyssal Blindness. In this writhing, grotesque form, your vision falters. The world becomes a fragmented haze. So what this modifier means is that a filter will be applied to your screen, making it so that you can only see the edge of textures and blocks. You can still see fairly well, but it definitely does make it harder to see things, as this form doesn't actually have eyes. The next negative modifier is Ethereal Shackles. Your incorporeal nature severs your connection to the tangible realm. You are unable to mine, construct, or directly strike others. So this modifier means that while in the Amorphous form, you will not be able to break any blocks, place any blocks, or even directly hit an enemy. This means that you'll have to use a bow, for example, if you want to be able to damage things. The next negative modifier is Fragile Vessel. Your body, though strange and resilient in its own ways, is frail compared to others. You endure only 6 hearts while in this form, a fragile existence tethered to the Sculk's tenuous lifeline. So this modifier is very similar to the Fragile Wretch modifier we were talking about, in that all it does is meaning that you only have 6 hearts, the rest is just flavor text. The last negative modifier in the Amorphous form is Irregular Frame. Your form resists the constraints of armor, rejecting its protection. The Sculk's shifting silhouette renders such trappings ineffective, leaving you vulnerable in the harshness of the world. This modifier means that while in this form, armor will be completely ignored. It will still be rendered on your player, but it will not prevent any damage in any way. The enchantments on the armor will still apply, just that the armor points will not. That's all we have for the Amorphous form. Let's move on to the next form, Miasma. The Miasma form is mostly meant for travel, so it's mostly just meant to get from point A to point B. The ability of the Miasma form is Phantom Resonance. Surge forward in a blur of vibrational energy, phasing through mobs as though they were but echoes in the deep. So what this ability means is that you will launch yourself forward, and for a brief period after doing so, you will phase directly through enemies. Their hitboxes will be completely ignored. The next ability is Choking Miasma. Unleash a cloud of noxious decay, a corrosive mist born from your essence. It saps the vitality of those nearby and nourishes allied Sculk entities, but the act weakens you, leaving fragments of your vitality diminished. This ability is your sneak plus primary, so what it means is that in an area around you, entities will take damage unless they are a Warden or another Sculkspawn, in which case they will be healed instead. Along with this, using the ability will take part of your health. The first positive modifier of the Miasma form is Dread Mantle. A palpable aura of menace slows the movements of those who dare approach, their steps faltering under the weight of your presence. So what this modifier means is that all entities around you while in this form will be given slowness. The next modifier we have is Luminous Corruption. Your form pulses with an eerie bioluminescent glow, casting a cold and unsettling light into the darkness. What this modifier means is that while in this form, you will cast light around you. While this isn't too particularly useful for you while in this form, if you're playing in multiplayer, it will be nice to light up the area for others while in caves. The next modifier we have is Shroud of Silence. The unseen tendrils of your essence cloak you from hostile eyes. Those who are not provoked cannot perceive your passage. So what this modifier means is that similarly to Murmuring Shade we were talking about earlier, hostile entities will not try to attack you at all unless you have hit them in some way first. Unlike Murmuring Shade though, you do not need to be surrounded by Sculk blocks. The neutral modifier of the Miasma form is Avoid Drift. The boundaries of the physical mean little to you. Glide effortlessly through the air, suspended by the Sculk's unearthly influence. So what this modifier means is that while in this form, you can fly, technically swim through the air. The reason this is a neutral modifier and not just a positive is it does mean that you are then unable to sprint while in this form. The first negative modifier of the Miasma form is Fragile Wind. The tenuous hold on your existence limits you to only 4 base hearts while in this form, a frail echo of more corporeal beings. What this modifier means is very similar to the similarly named modifiers in the other 2 forms, in that all it does is you're limited to 4 hearts and the rest is just flavor text. The next negative modifier of Miasma is Rainfall Disintegration. The gentle touch of rain is agony to your unstable form, dragging parts of you earthward and leaving you diminished with every drop. So what this modifier means is that while in the rain, as you are like a gaseous being, it will take some of those particles of your being and pull them into the droplet of water, and in doing so pull them away from your being down into the ground, damaging you. A quick note with Miasma is that it also has the negative modifiers Abyssal Blindness, Ethereal Shackles, and Irregular Frame. As I've already talked about these ones in the Amorphous form, I won't be repeating them, but they are exactly the same in this form. Alright, so that's all the forms done. Before I round the video off, I will note I did take the time to set up a custom skin for this origin. It is on the Modrinth page under the gallery. I put a lot of work into it and I think it looks pretty nice. I even took the time to set it up to work with the fresh moves, like eye animations. I recommend checking that texture pack out, as I think it kind of adds to the skin in a way. The fresh moves texture pack is actually the one you see in all my videos, where my character blinks and everything and is all animated, all fun. So that's all I have for this video. If you stuck around this long, odds are you enjoyed watching it. I'd really appreciate if you liked and subscribed, and I'll see you guys next time.